Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Sanam Solati Yurczyk with New England Prestige Realty.
And I'm Kelly Turner with Total Mortgage.
And today we're here to help you.
What are we trying to do here?
Trying to give our buyers advice on
how to get your offer accepted, because these days it's not quite as simple as it once was.
No, it's not. Even though it's shifting, and it's getting a little easier for buyers. But there's still really important strategies that you need to consider.
Absolutely. And I think one of the big things that we're going to talk a little bit about is what really does help, what is a gimmick, because there's a lot of gimmicks out there, and what can you do in advance to prepare yourself to get your offers accepted. So what is the number one thing you can do to get your offer accepted?
The number one thing is to get your finances secure.
Get your finances secure. So that's what I do. There is still buyers out there who try to make offers with no financing secured. So they say, I will get an approval later.
Yeah, I won't take anybody out without a pre-approval.
Yeah. And it just makes sense because what people, being a lender, right? I look at people's finances all day long and I have these conversations all day long, and what people think they can afford and what they can actually afford are not always the same thing. And what people want to afford, and then when they see the actual monthly payments, also not always the same thing.
Yeah, they don't always align.
Always align. Really, really important. The number one step is to get a mortgage pre-approval, and not just I plugged my information into some random internet company's website and they spit out an approval. Sellers still don't like those. To speak to an actual lender where they're going to review your documentation. They're going to make sure that what you think you make and what you actually make per mortgage guidelines is the same. What liabilities you have and what mortgages actually think your liabilities are is the same. And then they're going to issue you a real pre-approval.
To get fully underwritten is the way to go.
Yeah. And that's really, so that's my main objective for all buyers is we really have two types of approval. So at Total Mortgage, we call one a pre-approval, and that is where I review your documentation and I give you an approval. Then we have what we call a green light, and a green light means an actual underwriter has reviewed everything that we have given. They have checked it to mortgage guidelines, and then they're actually issuing you a mortgage commitment. For a seller, like you work with the sellers who get these, does that make a difference?
Absolutely. And just as a buyer, put yourself in the seller's shoe. If you hear that your potential buyer has the green light and that there's no major hiccups that they need to be concerned with when it's, financing time, that sounds a lot better than somebody that just has some of their basic information scrubbed through.
Yeah, exactly. So that is definitely the number one thing. If you want to get your offer accepted, you need to have your financing in order, make sure that it all checks out, and have either a pre-approval, but more importantly, a mortgage commitment in hand to make those offers.
And sometimes I'll get buyers that will do the online thing. They'll apply online, and I'm not saying that they don't work, because I've had plenty of buyers go that route. However, in a competitive market, when as a buyer's agent, I'm presenting to a listing agent our offer, they feel a lot more comfortable if it's a lender they're familiar with, if it's a lender that has a very strong track record, if it's a lender that, sometimes I'll ask my lenders, I'll say, Kelly, can you pick up the phone? Do you know this agent? If I don't have an existing relationship with them, can you call them and also vouch for the buyer, in addition to having the green light, the commitment in place? When the selling agent has full confidence that this part is all squared away, they can convey that to the seller, which of course puts your offer in a much better, stronger position.
Absolutely. And that's feedback that we get a lot from, because I probably speak to about 80% of listing agents when my buyers are making offers. Some don't want to talk to lenders, but lots of them do. And, we hear a lot like, oh, yes, I'm familiar with you. I'm familiar with your company. I feel great knowing that it's you. They feel great, again, knowing that I'm a real person who's actually looked at this information. They will ask me questions. I can't give them all the information, but I can give them the basics of, yes, I reviewed this documentation. Yes, I have pulled credit. Yes, I have seen pay stubs and bank statements. Yes, we're clear for funds. Yes, I pulled credit. And then people feel really good about that.
That's everything they want to hear. And from a buyer's standpoint, for the people that do get approved online, that's okay. But also talk to the trusted professional that your realtor is comfortable working with. Because in the event that falls apart, knowing that you are qualified, or maybe learning that maybe they have better options than you're even aware of. Again, it doesn't hurt. It only helps.
It only helps. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The number two thing, I think, which goes hand in hand with the financing, is the timing.
Yes.
So timing is everything in these transactions.
Yes.
If your timing works with the sellers, it can be a really big benefit. One thing that the mortgage commitment piece helps with is that if you have a mortgage commitment, we actually just had one this week. This is a great story. One of my loan officers in my branch had a loan go in on Thursday, a brand new contract, and was clear to close on Monday.
Wow.
They couldn't close because trade guidelines say you need at least 7 days between them.
Yeah.
It was essentially like forced from contract in because they had been fully underwritten. They had an appraisal waiver. The title came in really fast. But for everybody, they actually moved the closing up 3 weeks.
That's amazing.
The timing worked for everybody.
And just a little side note, the buyer probably did their homework that you asked them to do.
Correct. They were on top of it. We'd had them fully approved. We collected all their documentation, and they knew from making their offer that for the sellers, timeliness was really important to them. They wanted a quick, smooth transaction. And these sellers actually had a cash offer in hand, was slightly less than my buyer's financed offer, but they felt so good about the timing on the financed offer and the fact that they were so far through the process, they actually took the offer with financing.
That's impressive. Kind of getting back to that. So like, what's important to the seller? There's no like blanket, okay, if you do X, Y, and Z, your offer will be accepted. I mean, we're kind of like playing poker, right? You don't know what's on the other side, but you want to do everything you can to satisfy the other side. So learning as much as we can about the seller, what their needs are, what their desires are super important. Sometimes a fast closing is important. Sometimes the seller needs time to find suitable housing. Sometimes the buyer needs to have flexibility, or we can work with the seller creatively and close on the property because of the interest rates, to lock it down and then maybe lease back to the seller. But like having all these flexible options and satisfying what the seller wants is what's important, because it's not always the highest offer. And it's not always the most, I don't want to say the lowest offer, but it really it's satisfying what the seller wants.
It's a combination of things. Yeah, I would agree with that. We get currently in this market, I have a lot of buyers that have houses under contract. And now, because sellers don't love Hubbards, we can talk about that. They don't love Hubbards. So they don't love a buyer contingent on a sale. So what buyers are doing is they're putting their house on the market, getting under contract on their house, but with an open-ended closing date. So saying contingent upon my buyer, who's really the seller for these other people, finding a suitable, knows that flexibility was important to the seller. And then my seller, who's my buyer, goes under contract for the next house, and it's non-contingent upon the sale because they're already through all of the conditions, through appraisal on their sale. And those can work out really well. This market's a little bit, I feel like, unique for them because this is going to go under contract really fast. So they're a little unique, but it really helps a lot of buyers to go under contract first and then make offers, as opposed to make offers before they're under contract.
Because sellers want simple, clean, easy and when we do write up our contracts, like I'm ridiculous about crossing every T, dotting every I, because that also shows that you're paying attention to everything. So with the offers that you put in, if you can reduce your due diligence period. Again, I'm still a big believer, do your home inspections, but for as-is purposes or whatever, but minimize those things. So your mortgage contingency, minimize the time period. It doesn't have to be 21 days. It used to always be 21 days.
But if you already have a mortgage commitment and all you need is an appraisal, we sometimes do those, give me 10 days. Give me 10 days, give me 7 days, appraisal waivers are more common now, and those can even speed up that process a little bit more. I have one right now that they were already underwritten as a green light. Then they got an appraisal waiver. I was able to take their contract and hand back mortgage commitment.
That's beautiful.
So in one day, here's your mortgage commitment. The seller was like, this is amazing. And here we are, we're done.
Also, we're not seeing as many appraisal gaps. We're not seeing as many issues with appraisals, but having them in place gives a seller peace of mind. And basically all an appraisal gap is it kind of covers the difference between where the appraisal comes in and what the actual sales price is, if there happens to be a gap.
And that's something that as a buyer, you can be creative with. So just some like round number examples, you find a house that's on the market for $250, you buy it for $300, right? You put an offer for $300. You have a $50,000 difference. If there is a gap, so you go get it appraised and it appraises for $290,000. Okay, you have a $10,000 gap between the appraised value and the price. Historically, a lot of times at that point, the seller would lower the sale price.
Yeah.
That's not happening so much these days. So the buyer gets a couple of options. They can bring that $10,000, okay, to cover the gap. So we may reserve some down payment funds when we're making the offer for a gap. So that's an option. The other thing they can do is say they were putting 20% down. They actually can bring no more money, but just reduce their equity position and pick up mortgage insurance.
Yep.
That's really common. And mortgage insurance, people always think of monthly. Well, there's monthly options, but there's also one-time mortgage insurance. So that's another option as well, where somebody could take out like a small, sometimes it's like $1,000 for one-time MI, but maybe you have a $10,000 gap.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you rather pay $1,000 mortgage insurance than $9,000 extra dollars towards a gap?
Absolutely.
So you can be creative. So having an appraisal gap does not have to be a deal killer. It does not have to be a big deal. It does not have to necessarily cost you a lot of money. But working with a lender who can be creative, who understands what the choices are, can really, really help. But also assuring your seller, hey, I'll take care of this.
Yeah.
I'll take care of whatever it is. Upfront. And that's something that when I have people who maybe we think a gap could come into play, which sometimes we sort of know ahead of time.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, we may have a gap here. We talk about all the options. So my buyer knows before it happens, this is what my three choices are.
Yeah. No. And that's so important. I don't want to say you don't get that with an online lender, but you don't.
People don't even, I have a lot of buyers say, well, my lender said the only option I have is to bring $10,000. I'm like, hold please. There's more choices than that.
Yeah, there typically is always more choices.
Yeah.
Another thing, buyers, when you're out looking at houses, like let's say you happen to go to an open house, you don't want to tear apart the house that you're going to buy. We actually recently had that. We were staying in town here in Glastonbury, and a buyer came through represented by another agent. The buyer ripped the house apart and then put in an offer. And our seller accepted. And it's funny because I had a conversation with the seller. I'm like, this is probably going to be a troublesome, like, it's not going to be a fun experience. And it was not.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the deal ended up falling apart only for a better deal to come together for our seller.
Often how it goes.
Yeah. But I mean, if a buyer is ripping a house apart, like that's not something, it's not the right house. It's probably not the right house for you. And then with that, when it comes to actually submitting an offer, even though this market you're going to lowball an offer. We're still looking at comps to see where a fair price is to come in at, but the market hasn't fallen apart.
No.
And so there's no need for lowball offers, because if you're actually trying to secure it, you're dealing with a human on the other side. I've seen people not accept offers because their feelings have been hurt.
Yep.
Which sounds silly, but it happens.
It's because it's real people.
Yeah.
It's real people. Now, what are you seeing for home inspections? Because that's been interesting over the last 2 years.
Yeah. So I'm seeing more people are doing home inspections lately, like the past month or so. But we'll do like a 7-day inspection period. And again, they're for informational purposes only. So that's what I'm noticing more.
Yeah, we've kind of been seeing a lot of that as well. I definitely have more people still for information. Occasionally they're actual home inspections where it's not an as is, but those are less common. Now, what about the gimmicks, right? So we've seen signs at closing.
Of course, who's not going to accept an offer?
Right, pizza, moving trucks. Do these work, Sanam?
Yeah. So some of them do. Like the moving truck sounds appealing for some sellers. I've seen buyers offer to pay sellers closing costs. Like buyers have their own set of closing costs, but sellers also have their own set of closing costs, and they're all they're often almost about the same amount, believe it or not.
Attorney's fees, taxes, transfer taxes. There's a lot that comes into play.
There's a lot. And so when I've seen like buyers offer to help absorb some of that, relieve the seller from that, that's appealing. The tacos don't work. The pizza doesn't do anything. But I have heard of occasions where, like, if the person, because my buyers get really creative and they'll go on LinkedIn and they'll go on Facebook and they'll learn everything they do. They learn a lot more than I do. But sometimes they'll find, okay, they are involved in this charitable cause and this is really important to them. maybe they'll offer to put a donation in on their behalf. Because again, for some sellers, it's not always about the money.
Yeah.
Yes, it's business, but it's not about the highest price. Sometimes it's about, does this person have something in common with me? Or, I don't know, like,
yeah, no, you're totally right. We have a contract right now in my office that the buyer's grandparents owned this house 50 years ago, and it has passed through like 4 different sets of hands.
wow. I literally got goosebumps.
Yeah, I know, right?
Oh my God.
That meant a lot to the seller. And what's funny is the buyer didn't even know that it was her grandparents' house when she first viewed it.
Wow.
She had showed her parents and was like, look at this cute house. And they were like, that was grandma's house? Are you serious?
So funny.
And then it became really meaningful for her. And the sellers really kind of bought into how meaningful it was. And they were excited to turn this house back over to the family that had owned it prior. But that's the stuff that, it can make a difference. It can make a difference. What about love letters? That's the other thing. Let's talk about love letters, because those were hot for a while.
They were hot, and I used to encourage them. And then NAR came out with a blanket statement a little over a year ago, asking us not to really push them because it can open up so many fair housing violations.
It does, yes.
So when my buyers, I used to encourage time. Now I don't at all. But if my buyer is compelled, I don't completely dissuade it, but I make sure that we keep some of the things where we could
violate fair housing.
Violate fair housing is out. If they want to complement the structure of the house or the location or the improvements that the seller has made, that's great. They can do that and basically let the seller know how much they appreciate what they've done. But if it's basically like a brag letter about them and their family,
that's where it gets tricky.
Yeah, we're really not doing that anymore.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We have, because what happens a lot with a lender is that the realtor tells the buyer something and the buyer likes to fact check it with the lender. Like, this is what my realtor told me. And we're like, yeah, no, that's what they do. That's what they do. I am like a periphery part of this transaction, but I know what happens. And so we do get questions from people like, my realtor said I can't do the letter anymore. Is that true? And we're like, yeah, it is true, actually.
Yeah. Keeps everyone safe.
Keeps everyone safe and out of trouble. But there are ways to absolutely put in competitive, fabulous offers by doing your due diligence as a buyer. That's the number one.
Can I tell you? Sorry, I just remember. I had a buyer one time send for flowers with a note, and we loved everything about your home, the architecture, our offer did get accepted.
Look at that.
I don't know if it was because of the flowers, but our offer did get accepted.
Well, and that's, again, keeping in mind that the sellers are real people.
Yeah.
The sellers are real people, and we forget that sometimes. Yeah. But that's an idea. But I think working with a great lender, working with a great agent, working with an agent who knows the community in which you're purchasing in, very important.
But also working on, even if I'm working in a community that I haven't established myself, I'm working on building a relationship with that agent. Like, I had a buyer a few years ago in an area that I don't typically sell. And I kept sending the listing agent sweet notes, and our offer did get accepted. Also, we have a very polished offer. It was also a strong offer. And I also summarize everything so it's easy for them to digest. But I stayed on top of them. So many times when I'm listing properties, I'll receive offers and sometimes it's in spam. Like, I won't even know somebody sent me an offer because they don't have the courtesy to call me or let me know or have a conversation in advance. I think building those relationships are very important as well.
I would, and I think relationships are one of the key pieces of these transactions in all aspects. Yeah. The lender's relationship with your realtor, with the listing agent, the two agents' relationships, the inspector relationship, the appraiser. There are so many pieces of the puzzle that come into play in a real estate transaction, that all of those things working together is what helps you get your offer accepted.
Yeah. And then one last little silly thing too, like when it comes to offers in a market where we're offering a little bit more than asking or whatever the numbers are, instead of going for your standard like numbers that end in 0 or end in 5, end in a funky number.
Really? 3, 7?
Whatever your funky number is, whatever your lucky number is. Because let's say house is 400 and then let's say you offer 425 or 450. What if you offered 427, 875 or something?
Yeah, you could be that one smidge over.
Be that one smidge over. You don't know what's on the other side. So
I like it.
Little thing.
Well, my friends, as we move into the fall market where it has started heating up, it has started heating up. We are here for you. If you need anything, we're happy to help, but there are plenty of ways to get those offers accepted.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.
I will see you soon.
Bye.